Senate Bill 1017, a bill relating to time zone permanent daylight saving time in Virginia.
Gentleman from King George, Senator Stuart.
Thank you, Madam President. Move the bill pass and speaking to it.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, what this bill does is it would keep us on daylight savings time. So the time that we practice during the summer is the time we would stay on all year round. I wish I could tell you there was some brilliant reason I brought this bill, but I'm just really tired of changing the clock twice a year. It takes about a month for us to recover every time we change the time. And I just am really not sure why we put ourselves through it, although I'm beginning to learn as I brought this bill. Madam President, there was a fair amount of discussion in committee, and we went back and forth on whether it should be the time we practice during the summer or the time we practice during the winter. And for those of you who are very intelligent, daylight savings time is what we practice in the summer. Standard time is what we practice in the winter. It took me a while to figure that one out. But the purpose is just to keep us on one time and not to have to go back and forth. There was very interesting, I didn't think anybody was paying attention to this bill. And so I walked to my seat on the committee, and somebody had done these wonderful little sheets with all these notes. And they were explaining why there are substantial negative health effects to changing the time twice a year. The only problem was they wanted it to be standard time and not daylight savings time. So I don't know where they are at this point. But it's documented by medical professionals that we shouldn't be doing this. We should not be changing the time twice a year. And so I hope that you all will support this bill. I will try to answer any questions if there are any, but please pass this bill. Within an hour.
Chair recognizes Senator Petersen, the gentleman from Fairfax City.
A gentleman rise for a question.
Senator Stuart, will you yield for a question?
I will, Madam President.
Senator Petersen has the floor.
I would ask the gentleman, we are but one of 50 states, and I think we're one of probably 20 states in the Eastern time zone. Are we coordinating this law with our sister states, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, District of Columbia?
Senator Stuart.
Madam President, we are not. The United States Senate recently passed a bill which allows us to do this, although the House still has to pass it. There needs to be congressional approval. There's been discussion that's going to be done at the federal level, although I don't hold out a whole lot of hope for anything getting accomplished up there that benefits us. So no, the answer is we would be independent in that if we were to achieve.
Further question, Madam Chair.
Will the senator yield for a further question?
Yield.
The senator yields. Senator Petersen has the floor.
Gentlemen, if I have a hearing in Fairfax County at 10 a.m. and then I got to be in D.C. Superior Court at 1 p.m. and then maybe I have to be in Montgomery County, Maryland at 4 p.m. and my secretary's got to keep track of which time zone we're in. Would you not agree that this is going to drive administrative people crazy trying to coordinate different time zones in different states that neighbor each other?
Senator Stuart has the floor.
Madam President, I think he underestimates his administrative assistant. I think they're perfectly capable in keeping the schedule straight with two different time zones.
Further final question.
I suspect his iPhone will do it for him if he can.
Oh.
Will the gentleman yield for a further question?
Yield, Madam
the
President.
senator yields. Senator Petersen has the floor.
Let's say, God forbid, we schedule an athletic event in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we tell people it's at 1 p.m., and half the crowd shows up at 2 p.m. Would you think that might pose a problem?
Senator Stuart has the floor.
I suspect it would. They're going to miss the start of the game.
Madam President, I'll speak to this at the appropriate time.
Yes, sir.
Madam President, I got my own biases. I actually don't like daylight savings time. I think you ought to just live as God intended, which is the sun is at the apex at the middle of the day. Okay, that's a good way to live. Having said that, whatever we do, we have to standardize with our sister states. Or otherwise, those of us that are in interstate business, it is going to be an ever-loving nightmare trying to keep track of this. So I would just simply say, if you're in business, and I know more than a couple of us are, please, please be cognizant of those of us that practice not just law, but any business in different states. This is going to be a nightmare. And with all due affection and love to my friend from Stafford or Prince William or King William or Richmond, wherever it is, I ask that we vote against this bill.
That would be King George, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator Boysko, the gentlelady from northwestern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Madam President. May I question for the patron?
Will the senator yield for a question? The senator yields. Senator Boysko has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, does the patron realize that it was the American Medical Association and the American Association of Sleep Medicine Physicians who were not supportive of this bill because there are health consequences to us changing towards daylight savings time?
Senator Stuart has the floor.
It's an interesting question, and I think the senator was in there. They are the ones who testified that there are significant negative health effects to changing the time. They like standard time better. They don't like daylight savings time, which gives us an extra hour in the afternoon. They prefer standard time because, as the senator from Mecklenburg said, that's all his dog understands, is when the sun is right over your head at noon. But some of us would like to have that extra hour in the evening. We work all day and you come home and you like to be able to get outside and stretch your legs or do a little something and not just go to work in the dark and come home in the dark.
Madam President, just to follow up, speaking to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
One of the issues I think that the sleep medicine doctors and the medical society, as well as parent advocates who have children going to school, especially our teenagers, their circadian rhythms need to stay up later at night, and school starting when it's dark is very unhealthy for the kids. I know in Fairfax County and in Loudoun County, 15 years ago, I was working with a group of parents and sleep experts pushing to get school to start later. If we were to change to daylight savings time all year round, this would actually not be great for the kids either, as well as for the dog. So I would ask that we leave it the way it is right now and come back and try this again another day. I move that we do not pass the bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Fauquier, Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
I just would like to urge members of the body not to conflate the two different issues here. The first is what sleep experts and physicians and health professionals say about seasonal time changes entirely. And that is supportive of what the gentlelady just said, and that is they say it's bad. They don't like it. It causes all kinds of negative health effects. There's an increase in heart attacks. There's an increase, there's demonstrable poorer performance at work, more people, there are more car accidents right after we change the time for all the obvious reasons. It's super disruptive. And for sure, it has a larger impact on your wake time when it's time to change time for work. And also it has a big impact on kids in school. So we know that. The argument, I think, is less about the seasonal time change and more about which one do you pick. Do you choose standard time or do you choose daylight savings time? That was what the argument was. The United States Senate actually passed legislation unanimously to choose daylight savings time. And we had some of that debate in our General Laws Committee, and I was misguided initially, but I clearly wanted this body, and I hope that the United States Congress and that this would go to the president's desk, that we would choose daylight. I know that my colleague on the other side commented that we should just go with how God intended it. We shouldn't screw up the time. We shouldn't change it. It'll create all kinds of issues for our clocks and our staff and where we're supposed to be and what the court docket says and all that. And I regret my colleague's not here, but he said if we were going to do it God's way, we just wouldn't have a clock at all, which is actually true. But my point being, more daylight is, I think, for people who really desperately want to do things after work and later in the day, daylight is incredibly important and meaningful for all the things that we try to do. And I understand that people have objections to more darkness in the morning, but I would just implore the body. I know it's probably not very popular, but I think a lot of people want more daylight. And so I would just urge you to please consider that.
Chair recognizes Senator Morrissey, the junior senator from Richmond.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
For the reasons that many of my colleagues talked about extending daylight hours, this would be an absolutely great bill if it came from United States Senator Richard Stuart instead of State Senator Stuart. Now, here's the problem. It's what my colleague and my friend from Fairfax City said. Can you imagine the conversations throughout the Commonwealth when a resident in Virginia talks to his friend, relative, etc., in one of our sister states, and sets a play date, or to attend a concert, or a game. Every conversation ends with this: your time or our time. And that's the problem with this bill. So if Senator Stuart can go to the United States Senate and get them to agree on a extended daylight time, that would be fantastic. And I would love to see that happen. But for the practical aspects, this bill has got to fail. Thank you, Madam President.
Chair recognizes the senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I haven't figured out whether it's best to do daylight or standard time. There are really good arguments on both sides, but what I'm hung up on is who should do it. Fun fact, when the United States Senate passed the bill referenced by the senator from Fauquier, they did so by accident. They did so, it was on their version of the uncontested calendar, but one senator was supposed to come in and remove it, and the story got back to me, forgot. And so they were all, the other 99 were quite surprised that they had passed it, and it's caused quite a bit of consternation. Now, I think this is something that should be left to the federal government, because as it's not just your executive assistant you will cause chaos with, but planes, trains, and automobiles, and interstate commerce, and particularly along our border states. And I think if we are going to go down the path of making either daylight or standard permanent, and as someone who finds it very difficult getting myself and 2 children ready in the dark, you know, I can see an argument on that side. But also as someone who likes to have an extra hour of daylight when I come home to walk the dog, I could be convinced either way. I could be convinced to keep it this way. But we need to remain standardized because of all of the reasons already mentioned by the gentleman from Fairfax City. So I ask that we vote against the bill.
Chair recognizes Senator Marsden, a gentleman from Western Fairfax County.
Thank you, Madam President. Speak to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
I just got a very short concern, and that's Zoom call nightmares. Trying to schedule Zoom calls with people in different time zones is going to crush us. Thank you, Madam President.
Chair recognizes Senator Edwards, the gentleman from Roanoke City.
Yeah, Madam President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
I've thought a lot about this. I guess everybody has, because the health care providers are absolutely right. It totally messes everybody's life up. Spring forward, fall back, and it's bad for children as well. It's the worst thing in the world for at least a week or so in late March and early November to go back and forth like this. And it's particularly bad for children who have to, if it's daylight savings time in the wintertime, they have to get up so much early. And so it's really not good for children. I've come to the conclusion that only Congress can really do this, because you cannot have the situation where Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina have different time zones. There are some mathematicians I've heard recently came to the conclusion we ought to have one 24-hour day. start at Greenwich Mean Time around the world and have the exact same time everywhere. You think that's crazy? That's what the airlines do. The airlines cannot have different times because they need to know exactly when they got to arrive in Tokyo or San Francisco or New York, where it happens to be. It makes a lot of sense to have one 24-hour clock that everybody has. It's 1 o'clock in Roanoke. It's now 11 o'clock, whatever it is, in San Francisco. But it's be 1 o'clock in Roanoke, 1 o'clock in San Francisco, 1 o'clock in Tokyo, et cetera, et cetera. It makes a lot of sense, but Congress has to do this. And I can't imagine it being done any other way. We can't have each state having a different time zone. It's bad enough in Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia. There's an hour difference right smack down the middle of Bristol, parts in Virginia and parts in Tennessee. And it's 1 o'clock in one place and 12 o'clock in another place. But I've come to the conclusion Congress has got to do this and get it fixed. And I would like to see one time zone that's daylight, that's just standard time, and not any of this daylight stuff. It makes more sense. Everybody has one standard time until we get this 24-hour clock idea taken care of. So with that, I'm going to vote against the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. Madam President.
Chair recognizes Senator Saslaw, the senior senator from Fairfax County.
There are more than just a few problems with this bill, but
for what purpose does the senator rise?
To speak to Senate Bill 1017.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you. I don't know how many of you in here use Dulles or National Airport, but you will have a nightmare of unimaginable proportions on your hands, okay? And possibly even with the airports that are in Virginia and other places, because the airlines, they're going to have the craziest mixed up schedule. This is something that ought to be, I wouldn't have a problem if this was conditioned on a national bill, doing this. But to do this where we would be, for instance, you would have Virginia on one time, and let's take television or the news. The 7 o'clock news, which the three stations are in, for Northern Virginia anyway, are in D.C. So the 7 o'clock news is now 8 o'clock. The 11 o'clock news is now midnight. If you're used to turning on that Today Show at 7 o'clock, you don't turn it on till 8. I could go on and on and on, and I know there are problems that we would have to live with if it was a nationwide bill. Kids going to school for 3 or 4 months in total darkness. There's just a lot. When you do this piecemeal, there's a reason they do this nationwide, and as far as I know, only Hawaii and Arizona have exempted out of it. But you're going to have problems you can't even begin to imagine doing this piecemeal, as particularly, as was pointed out earlier, if you got Virginia on one time, North Carolina, Tennessee on another, Maryland on another. I mean, this doesn't make a shred of sense. And like I said, if it was conditioned on a passage by the U.S. Congress, it'd be a different story. But I would encourage you all to do the sensible thing and put this bill on hold, or send it back to committee, or send it down the tubes.
Chair recognizes.
I'm opposed to it.
Chair recognizes Senator Suetterlein, the gentleman from Roanoke County.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking briefly to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the senator from King George for bringing this fine bill. This is the sort of thing I hear from constituents all the time about. It was especially interesting hearing the comments from my friend, the senator from Fairfax City, who, if there's a bill like this that usually divides the caucuses, more likely we're on the same side. But I was disappointed that his points that he thought he was making actually proved why we ought to do this, why we need daylight savings time. Talking about business, I hear from so many small businesses, especially small retailers, that want more hours in the evening to be open. I can tell you, people don't ask to see houses before work, but a lot of people like to see houses after work. And you can show a lot more houses after work if you've got more daylight. And there's a lot of people on Main Street with their stores open that they can have a lot more customers walk by. That is fantastic for business. And when I hear he probably has knocked on more doors than anyone collectively in this chamber, and I think that's a credit to him. I'm slowly trying to catch that number, but he started ahead of me. But this also gives you more time to door knock, which is fantastic. You're not going to be door knocking people at 8 a.m. in the morning. And so this gives you more door night. And lastly, talking about the ball game, this means more ball games. We don't have as much fields as we would like. I remember that even became a big issue in Fairfax County and may have cost a delegate his seat when he talked about it the wrong way. But this means that we have more time for more games in the evening, especially for our rec leagues. I think this is fantastic. I'm not going to trespass on our time anymore, but I thank the senator from King George for bringing this excellent bill to the floor today.
Chair recognizes Senator McPike, the gentleman from Prince William County.
Thank you, Madam President. Speaking to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
So I have some concerns that have not been addressed here today, because when we change our clock, we also change something else, our fire alarm batteries. And so I have some real concerns from a public safety standpoint on this one, Madam President.
Chair recognizes Senator Barker, the gentleman from Southern Fairfax County.
Madam President, addressing Senate Bill 1017, speaking to that.
Yes, sir. The gentleman may continue.
I would point out that there is a second enactment on this bill that says that the provisions of this act shall become effective upon enactment of an amendment to 15 U.S.C. Subsection 260 or another applicable law which authorizes states to observe United States Eastern Daylight Time year-round. So we're not in a position where this would be implemented here directly. There would have to be enabling legislation at the congressional level. And I would also point out that if we had standard time on the summer solstice in June, it might help with people coming to vote about that time on the primary day, but we would have daylight starting at 4 a.m.
Chair recognizes Senator Rouse, the junior senator from Virginia Beach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to speak to the bill.
The senator has the floor.
As many of you know, Virginia Tech is home to Thursday night football. There would be no Thursday night football if this bill goes through. It'll be Thursday day football. So with that, I oppose the bill, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Chair again recognizes Senator Vogel, the gentlelady from Fauquier.
Thank you, Madam President. I apologize for speaking twice. However, I had my button pushed before and then turned it off after the gentleman from Prince William made his remarks. But I wanted to emphasize that...
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. To emphasize what he mentioned, which is the language at the end of the bill, which does consider the fact that we are not going to stand alone. That's number one. And number two, what other states have done, if they didn't have the conforming language, is that they have said, we will wait, this will be contingent on certain states around us passing this legislation. So I think it's important for us to consider that we were not actually trying to only be Virginia in this larger, metropolitan area, in particular in Northern Virginia, that we were being sensitive about that. And with that, I renew my motion that we pass this bill on behalf of my colleague.
Chair recognizes Senator Petersen, the gentleman from Fairfax City.
All right. Madam Chair, in rebuttal, and
the senator has the floor.
I apologize for speaking twice. Please note the exact language. It doesn't mandate the states. It simply authorizes the states. So we could still be all alone with our own little time zone, and everybody else would be on a different time zone. So this is not saying everybody move together. It simply authorizes. So that enactment clause does absolutely nothing to solve our problem. We would still be the Lone Ranger with whatever time zone we choose to leave in. So please don't be deceived by that. Thank you.
The gentleman from King George, Senator Stuart.
Thank you, Madam President. If no one else wishes to speak.
Senator has the floor.
Madam President, I rise to tell you that I really do not believe this is going to be the end of football in Virginia or Virginia Tech. I don't think it's going to cause Zoom nightmares, and I cannot imagine it's going to be a nightmare of unimaginable proportions, contrary to what the senior senator from Fairfax said. You know what? If you can tell time, I think we're going to be just fine. And we're going to get an extra hour in the evening when you come home from work, and that way we don't have to go to work in the dark, come home from dark, and it's medically proven that we need to stop changing the time. I have begun to understand now what the fight is. Half of you want to do Eastern or daylight savings times, half want to do standard time, and so I think we must have compromised some years ago and changed the time twice a year. But I submit we should go to daylight savings time, and I hope you all will support the bill.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Does any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 18, noes 21.
Ayes 18, noes 21. The bill fails.